All right. Welcome everyone. Come on in. Looks like we already got people joining, which is great. We'll get started here in just a minute. If commenting is enabled, feel free to let us know where you're dialing in from. Usually we get people all over the world for live streams. Maybe not 2 o'clock. We'll see. We'll see what kind of coverage we get at 2 o'clock today. But please feel free to chat where you are coming from. Great. Come on in. We'll get started in a few minutes as folks are coming in. Oh, I see some names I know. Lacey, what's up? Sophia. Mona from Orlando. Great. Toni, where are you today?
Northern California.
Northern California, Evans and Brooklyn. Awesome. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm sure people will continue to come on in. But really excited today to do, I think this is our first live stream of the summer. So welcome to everyone. Really excited to bring in two friends of mine and partners of ours. So I'm going to go ahead and tee things up here. But really today is all about how we can help support portfolio teams with hiring and fundraising. And let me get to my my slides here. Sorry, my keyboard's all over the place. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Mike Pruce. I am the founder of Visible. I am really excited to be joined by Evan, who's the CEO of Getro. I think I see a lot of you here on this, even today are Getro customers. This is fun because we just did a great dinner with Evan and the Getro team in New York City on Tuesday. And we're carrying that over to a webinar and live stream that's got a little bit more reach than in-person dinner. And then also Toni, who's actually a mutual customer of both Visible and Getro. And Toni's the principal at Preface. And I'll go ahead and kind of introduce both, and I'll hit it over to them as well for anything I missed. But like I said, Evan's the founder of Getro. He's based in Brooklyn. Getro is a completely distributed company all over the globe, but he's also a member of Sandbox, Unreasonable Reality, Techstars, and Starting Block. Really loves spending his time supporting entrepreneurs, investors, and just really just remembering to smile often. Evan, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Excited.
Anything I missed that you want to make sure I cover?
I don't know. I love dogs. I'll get into it as we get going.
Yeah, perfect. And then Toni. Toni is the principal at Preface Ventures, who's an amazing community builder and a background in marketing with some same organizations, Summit, Reality, and brought her skills all over the world. So excited to dig in. Toni, where is Preface Ventures today in terms of kind of portfolio size to help give our audience an idea of the number of companies they're supporting?
How many Portcos we have? We have close to 50 now.
Okay, there we go. 50. And just to kind of tee up Getro, Evan, I'll go ahead and let you jump in here.
Sure. Yeah, so Getro has been working in the VC PE space for almost 8 years now. We're working with over 700 funds and have quite a few people who come visit Getro job boards every month. So we have the job board product where we're aggregating open jobs from the career pages of the portfolio companies. We white label that and brand that for your fund, and that lives on your website. And then over the last 2 years, we've been spending a lot of time on our new product we call Getro Connect, which is basically a way of managing the contacts in your network, making better introductions for portfolio companies. So that could be around hiring, which we'll talk more about today, sales, fundraising, pretty much anything there. And yeah, we've been very lucky to support this community for pretty much the whole time that we've been in business, and have been sponsors of the VC platform group, have been very active in the community, and also excited to be partnering and spending more time with Mike and Visible. We had a great dinner last night in New York, and excited to do more things like this together.
Awesome. Yeah, the feeling is mutual, sir. Just a little bit about Visible. Visible is slightly older than Getro. We started the business in 2015. For the first 5 years, we built products solely for founders. So a way for founders to update their investors, manage a fundraising process, and track the core KPIs that are most important. And since then, we've launched a product for venture capital firms. So we help with the post-investment monitoring and management of your portfolio companies. And since 2020, we've now scaled Visible to over 590 funds all over the world. And also 5,200 founders are customers of ours on the founder side all over the world as well. So it's great to be here and chat with you both today. If anyone has questions, please feel free. Our team is monitoring questions. We'll either try to get to those live, real time, or at the end. So please drop them in Zoom Q&A. We're getting a live Google Doc on our side, so we'll go ahead and answer those at the end. This is being recorded, so we usually get some of those questions. We will send out this recording and recap after. I think like maybe to help kick off the conversation, I'd love to just quickly talk about like venture and how venture platform has evolved. If we think about venture in the 2000s, it's pretty scarce and really just focused on financial success, and firms probably didn't have to differentiate as much as they do today. 2010s, we get to capital started to become more abundant. I think you start to hear platforms differentiate or funds differentiate, offering a platform or value add services, not just capital. And then during 2020s, value add I think is seen as like a must-have table stakes. And now this day and age, vibe coding is a thing. It's cheaper to start a company. Like relationships, we believe are at the core of a lot of things that are going to be differentiators. That's one of our beliefs of why we're doing these live streams this year. But maybe just to kick things off, for you, Evan, to start, you've been building Getro, like you said, for the last 8 years. What's the biggest shift you've seen in how firms approach portfolio support?
Yeah, I think certainly it's become a lot more sophisticated. When we were getting started, there were very few people in a platform role. I think I don't even know if anyone was calling themselves a head of platform at that time. I don't know when the first one was. Maybe there was a few. But the VC platform group, I think, started right around maybe 2017 or 2018. So it was all emerging. And I think most of the folks who were helping with value creation were either doing other things, so it's kind of like a part of their role, or maybe they were more junior and they were just kind of like helping day to day with small operations tasks, but it wasn't really thought of as a strategic role in most funds. And I think now we've seen that change tremendously. So there's thousands of people that are members of the VC platform community, and at this point I think the majority of funds with 50 to 100 million in assets under management have at least one person in a platform role. And beyond that, we've seen funds specialize into different vertical, functional focuses. Talent tends to be the first one that comes online, but we have customers who are specialized in go-to-market to make business development introductions, fundraising support, marketing, PR, like pretty much every functional stack of a company, depending on the kind of the specialization of the fund or their background. So yeah, it's really developed quite a lot. It's been exciting to watch.
What about the past, like even just few years? Like, have you seen any shifts in the last 2 or 3 years? Maybe not the whole 8 past years, but like the last two. Like
Yeah.
anything on the hiring front or just different trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, and I think in a way the VC industry always kind of tracks the optimism of the broader market, right? Like you see these big booms and kind of like contractions depending on what's happening in the broader ecosystem. Over the last few years, there's been a lot more pessimism in VC than there was, obviously in like the kind of Observe 2021 era. But it's been a weird last 5 years for sure. Um, I think at least maybe late 2022 to 2024-ish, we saw some firms pulling back on some of the talent support work that they were offering, mostly because a lot of their portfolio companies weren't hiring as much, and so that was less in demand. And that would either lead to firms kind of supporting more generally on talent, so maybe not actually doing full stack recruiting like some firms were doing, or supporting in other ways like with sales intros or fundraising or kind of advisory work. Starting to kind of see that becoming a little bit more optimistic again, especially in all the capital that's flowing into the AI ecosystem, whatever that is defined as these days. And so yeah, I think that that's even coming back online, especially for larger funds, and even through the whole period, I think larger funds maintain their investments in the platform, and smaller funds, tend to kind of scale up or scale down depending on what the needs are from the portfolio.
Any predictions of where we're heading when
Ooh.
it comes to platforms?
Yeah, I mean, I think people will probably continue to specialize. I think that there are more tools available today in the ecosystem, certainly than there was when we started. I don't think there was almost anyone focused exclusively on building tools for the space. Um, but it's getting easier to add more targeted support for portfolio companies with less people doing that. So I think teams can scale their impact without necessarily having to scale headcount by leveraging some of the tools that are out there. I think a lot of folks are building their own solutions. What I've seen, at least now, is that unless you have a very dedicated buy-in from at the leadership level, and you're able to actually have a team of software engineers, I mean, even then, it's really challenging to build and maintain. If you don't have that, I think it's extremely challenging to build and maintain. So, small apps that help on the side with small tasks are very straightforward and fun to play with. Some of the bigger lift things, still seeing most firms, using external parties for that.
Software does rust. Is what
Software
I
does
would. It
rust.
was that I'm biased saying that, but we spend a lot of time simply maintaining. Toni, kind of flipping over to you, like how's your role and how has portfolio support and platform evolved over the course of your career and time at Preface?
Yeah, I mean, I've been at Preface for 5 years now, and we are on like, I'd say the smaller side that Evan mentioned with in terms of team size, we're less than 5 people. And so we have evolved as our companies have evolved. One of the things that we pride ourselves on being is like very high touch, open door policy with our founders. And an aspirational goal we have with every company that we invest in is to be on like a texting basis with the founders, right? Like anything you need, text us, call us, first call in, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, One example that I can think through that we didn't really put a lot of emphasis on 5 years ago that we are now is like, it sounds simple, but recurring calls with our founders. It's become much more important over time. And I think a lot of that is, with everything changing so quickly, we want to be in a position to be proactively useful for our teams and our portcos. And for us to do that, we have to be consistently informed on the regular, right, via investor reporting. But the additional layer is just having the recurring touch points with our founders. And so that's something that has shifted. And it used to be like a nice to have. Now it's just like an absolute. And we've seen correlation with like success and help in us helping our like founders navigate whether it's challenges or things that they're thinking through, being sounding boards, etc.
I love that. Where do you see like companies, Toni, that come to you for help or struggling with? And yeah, maybe I'll pause and kind of wrap with that question with you.
Like right now,
Yeah,
today's landscape.
yeah, it's it is landscape.
We, where do we see companies struggling? I'll say like we pulled some data before this webinar, and there is a correlation between companies that aren't as communicative with us, we've noticed tend to struggle a little more. And like 2 out of 3 times, it's usually because there's like a layer of bad news that they just don't want to surface to their investors. And for us, it's like the more that we're in the know, especially for us wanting to be proactively useful, the more that we can help before those even become an issue, right? Or we're in there in the weeds with you when they're an issue. I think that's one area. And then another area that we're seeing companies struggle in right now is, I mean, think fundraising in general. We invest in early stage, so like seed and pre-seed. And so like the bar for raising Series A's right now is higher, given the landscape with like Gen AI companies. that are growing very, very, very quickly and at an almost impossible rate. And so there's like an onus now on founders to get to profitability while still growing at a very interesting venture rate, for their funds.
Gotta love it. Do more with less.
Yeah. Be capital efficient.
Yeah, yeah. While we wrap up this slide, last question for you, Evan. When it comes to like support and platform today, it's evolved as you said over the last few years as teams have grown and shrunk and grown and shrunk. Like, what are the must-haves or table stakes that you see with the customers you serve and customers you talk to?
In terms of like kind of how to set up a platform function at a fund.
Yeah, just like in terms of like platform, I think there's a lot, like there's like the
Yeah.
annual founder meeting, where like the must-haves or like table stakes where
Yeah.
it feels like, hey, I have to have this because every other fund has this thing that I'm competing with.
Yeah, I think there is a little bit of FOMO where you feel like you have to do everything. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I would recommend saying like, what are the one or two areas that we can really deliver in? And then there's almost like a 2 by 2 of like, how do we prioritize the founder relationships? And is there systems we can build that add value to all of the founders in the portfolio? But then as we go deep, we're going deep with founders that either need urgent support or, they're in the process of maybe getting to a liquidity event of some sort. Like, how can we support in that? So being pretty targeted, especially if you have a small platform function or you're just an individual. I'll plug Corey Bolotsky's content. I think he does a really good job of going really deep in the platform world. If folks on the call aren't familiar with his blog, but yeah, I think there are systems like folks set up like a discount page or, folks have a founder summit. Like there are some things that I think are easy wins. We have one of our investors actually has a Slack Connect channel and they're kind of posting talent resumes in there. Folks are asking for help and other founders can jump in. It's a way for founders to also meet each other. And then every once in a while they're doing kind of facilitating introductions either between founders or to advisors in the community. So there's some just like tactical things that you can do on a day-to-day basis. But when it comes to what is the brand promise of the platform team, I think like, under committing and over delivering, especially if you're relatively new in the role and trying to figure it out, is way better than trying to communicate that you're doing all these initiatives. Because, at the end of the day, I think being a head of platform, almost regardless of um, your team size, because typically if you have a bigger fund, there's a bigger platform team, but there's also more founders and more things going on. So it doesn't necessarily get easier and more focused. Like, you're getting pulled in lots of different directions. You're typically seen as the liaison with founders and maybe even executives at founders teams. Uh, People are trying to delegate requests to you. Founders are asking you to do things. So it is really hard to prioritize. And you need to have some open space available for the urgent things that come up that are impossible to plan. So if you have 10 initiatives going on, you're not going to be able to do that as well. And I think that can lead to burnout in the role.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. What was the name of the person you with the blog? We just got a question.
Corey, Corey Blatsky. I'll just throw it into the chat.
Okay. Awesome. We can we'll dig that up too and make sure that's in the recap.
Cool.
This comes from Lyra Hippo. This is kind of the building and scaling platform broken down by talent, BD, marketing and comms, community, ops, and events. Evan, when you think about platform, I think people, there's a lot. These could each be a single person, but like, what are some of the low lift, high impact ways you can scale without necessarily adding headcount, right? Especially if I'm a new fund just getting started, I can't afford, more than maybe a half a person. Like, what can I do today that will end up paying dividends for me later?
Mm. I mean, one thing that comes to mind for me is just having relationships with the founders. Like Toni mentioned, they're on a text basis with the founders. Maybe that's not realistic for you if you're at a fund that has, 400 portfolio companies or something like that. So it depends a little bit on your context, but I do think that trying to think about how to automate systems that support you and adding value more systematically versus you being the bottleneck to every single value creation moment is important. So tactically, that might look like creating a Slack Connect channel, like I mentioned, having like an automated DM that goes out to every founder, once a quarter or something, just asking what their top problems are. Um, Using tools like Getro to create automated lists of contacts in your network. So that might be like if you have an advisory group or folks in your network who have offered to help founders with problems that they're trying to solve, reminding founders that that exists and fielding those introduction requests. Um, Another thing that I see a lot is, but by leveraging tools, you can get a lot more specific about who you are looking for introductions to within the network of the fund. So oftentimes, you might have a founder ask, "Hey, we're looking for, COOs, candidates because we're about to hire a COO. Who can you help us with?" Without a tool like Getro or some of the other tools out there, it's really hard to make specific requests to the partners at your firm. Like a general ask of, "Hey, who do we know that's a COO?" It typically doesn't really get a response. So if you can use a tool to make that really specific and say, "Hey, here are the 3 people we're trying to connect with. Can you make this intro?" That's great. But then even going one step beyond that and setting up some time, maybe it's weekly or maybe it's monthly, where the team is sitting down and saying, "Let's go through and take action on some intros today." Because it's hard for, if you're a partner at a fund, you got a million things going on. It's hard to actually sit down and execute those requests. And so actually blocking some space and holding that space can be really great. And, to get back to your question, making a high value introduction, I think, is one of the biggest things you can do for a founder, whether that's an executive hire, someone that they could sell their product to, their next investor. So increasing the number of high value introductions, I think, is increasing the kind of net promoter score of the founders that ends up driving more deal flow and ends up, building that relationship so that when they do have those hard things to come up, like Tony said, they actually trust you to tell you. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I love it. I love the very tactical, like block time and calendar to do intro. Like that makes it a ton of sense and something I'll walk away with. Tony, you mentioned the recurring meetings that you recently introduced with founders, kind of get more of a pulse on a regular basis, in a proactive way. In addition to that, like what resonates well with the founders in the portfolio with Preface? Like what resonates well are the things that you hear from them that they love, that they get value from, of all the different things you might be seeing here on this slide?
Yeah, I mean, when Evan was just talking just now, I was like, wow, he's describing one of the areas that we pride ourselves in. We have something, well, one of our kind of promises to our founders is we will be some of your first customer intros. And
Mm.
we try to do that within the first 100 days that we've invested in them. And then another thing that we have grown over the past few years is our Preface and Partner Network. And that is a range of like friends of the fund, supporters of the fund, whether LP or not LP. But they tend to range from like CTOs at Fortune 1000 companies and like people who have founders who have exited and are maybe semi-retired now. And just sort of like our aggregate Rolodex of people who we are on good relationships with. And so like when our founders need those like high value introductions or like a question or a sounding board or something, we can look to our unpartner network and be like, hey, we have 2 people who would fit this ask. Let us make an intro for you. And to Evan's other point, we do calendar things in our team calendars of when to
Mm.
support X, Y, and Z founder or Portco. And it's just, I'm glad that we're not the only ones who do that. I'm like, yeah, I know the calendar every week on our team calendars for those.
Evan, how do you recommend like keeping things um like personal and real and authentic versus like transactional? Because I feel like if I try to automate everything, then it's all uh maybe not differentiated and doesn't feel like it's real. Like anything you would
Yeah.
recommend of like how do I balance the like, yes, I'm a single person in this role supporting 50 companies. And so I need to automate as much as I can while keeping it authentic.
Yeah.
Oh, that was for Evan. Sorry.
Or well, both you'll get a turn too, Tony. Sorry.
Go ahead, Evan, you start. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tony, you're probably better than me at answering this, but I guess what comes to mind for me is um, sometimes it's okay to be transactional, especially, but maybe only if you're aligned with a pain point that the founder is experiencing. So there's some of that that's like founders are moving really fast. They need answers to questions, they need resources, they need introductions. If the pain is great enough, they might be willing to self-serve that or use a system that you've built. But it is a very common thing, at least for our customers, where setting up automated systems, especially for intros, is tough because it kind of feels like you're out of the loop and you don't really know what's going to happen. And, so like every introduction should be double opt-in for starters. I think that helps make introductions feel more personal. Um, but at the end of the day, I think it's how aligned are you in understanding what the pain point is of that founder. And that's probably number one priority. And also, like, if you've had some touch points with a founder where they know that there's a relationship, and then you just send them something that maybe it would feel transactional if it was out of left field, but if you've done that check-in recently, then that trust is there. So the more trust exists in a relationship, the easier it is to have a transaction that doesn't feel like inauthentic or like you're being kind of pushed into a system or something.
Yeah. Tony, what would you add or change or plus one there?
I would plus one everything he said, and because we do have like our recurring meetings and check-ins, and I would say for a good amount of our founders, we're on a texting basis, the ask can come out of blue to us, and then we'll just our goal is like within 1 to 2 days we respond, right? And so that's like, it keeps it authentic, even though on surface it might feel like, oh, it's an ask, here's the answer. But it's like, no, you're working at the speed of light. Let us help you at the speed of light.
I'm curious, once that request comes in, let's say through text, are you trying to track and measure the impact then? Or are these more like ad hoc one-off type things that you're not going to track?
We'd love to do a better job at tracking, but sometimes, when it rains, it pours. So we do our best with like the team size that we have, and there's always room for improvement on like tracking metrics and automation. And if someone solves all of that for a fund one day, then I will be the first customer.
Yeah.
But hint, hint, Evan and Mike, if you ever do
We're all working on it. We're all
together.
working on it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's kind of an exciting moment in technology because I think some of the LLM technology starts to make that possible, where you have tons of unstructured data that's coming through all these different communication channels that don't talk to each other. And it's like traditionally it would just be so expensive to try to solve for that. But I think using the LLM to take the unstructured, make it structured, put it in a centralized place, make some meaning out of it, and then turn that into like a report. I think a lot of folks are working on things like this, including us, probably including Mike, and so give us like 6 to 12 months while we're on it.
Abigail wrote in, uh, and maybe the answer is not yet, but how are you tracking engagement through texting versus emails versus meetings? I think that question is probably for you, Tony. It sounds like you'd love to, but are you trying to get it into a place, or any like tips or tricks you would have for Abigail?
Well, emails are a little bit easier because we run everything through a CRM. So we have like that database that we can mark. The texting, honestly, it's a little like we take screenshots and then like we send it so that we have like an aggregate there. I haven't filed or created some system that like like notates all of the screenshots. And that's like to the extent that granted our team is getting text from all angles. So, if you remember, great. If you don't, okay, well, we'll remember somewhere in the head. And yeah, it's something that I think maybe bigger teams that have more people, if they've figured it out, I'd love to know the secret, but we're doing our best over here.
Only if Apple would open it up, and if maybe
Right?
make our lives
Great.
easier if we could integrate
Yeah.
with iMessage. One last question for you, Tony, before we jump to the next slide. Why should VCs care about like supporting the entire portfolio and not just top performing companies?
That's a very good question. And I mean, I'll I'll jump into it. I mean, as a investor, right? Like your responsibility to your founders is to support them when you invest that money. Your responsibility to your LPs is to make sure that you're doing your best to support all your companies in your portfolio. And I'll add the additional layer of like every quarter, portfolio companies change in their status, whether they're doing really well or, if something hit the fan and like things tanked a little bit. And that quarter over quarter growth and that trajectory changes on a daily basis. And so for us, it's like, yeah, we should be supporting all of our companies because you never know what tomorrow holds. And it's just like the handshake, right? Like, okay, you're coming into our portfolio, we are going to be there with you. That is our agreement with you to the extent that you let us, right? Like if you go cold on us, then that's a whole different story. But
Mhm.
I mean, it's just the responsibility of venture, right? Like you invest in companies, you support them so that it's a win on both ends.
I always find it interesting when people for like top performing companies in particular, I'm like, why mess it up? Like, why get it the way, you know? Let
Yeah.
the top performing companies be top performing companies. But yeah, I digress. All right, we'll move on. This is from Kyle Poyer, who I'm sure some of you know or read his content, especially if you are in the SaaS space. And he recently was on our podcast and talked about talent is probably the low hanging fruit, the ability to help with hiring, leadership hiring ends up being something like I think every company needs. And I'd say like, kind of, and just to kick off the hiring part, where should VCs start when diving into supporting companies with hiring? Is it like leadership? Is it technical roles? Um, Anything like where if I'm just starting it up, like or thinking about revamping our talent support, anywhere you would recommend them starting?
Yeah. Well, first I would say that typically the brand of the venture fund is going to be uh I mean, I can't say actually typically, but in some cases, the brand of a venture fund is going to be better known, especially if you invest in very early stage companies, than the companies themselves. And at the very least, there's an audience that you have as a venture fund of people who are paying attention to the fund and maybe paying attention to certain partners at the fund and respect your work. And so you automatically kind of have an asset in terms of your ability to be recognizable to a candidate when maybe a portfolio company isn't. So that's something to be aware of. Even the general person that comes to your website and maybe, if you have a job board, for example, clicks through and applies to a portfolio company is going to be way better than the general applicant they're typically getting from a platform like Indeed or LinkedIn. It's like the average person doesn't even know about startups at all. So that's kind of an interesting footnote. I think the job board tends to be low-hanging fruit, not necessarily because it turns you into like Indeed.com tomorrow and you're like driving all this crazy traffic, but more because typically you have an influx of people who are coming either to the partners or to folks in the platform team saying, hey, you know a lot about startups, you have an amazing network of portfolio companies. I'm kind of starting to think about, my next opportunity. What would you recommend? And in the recruiting world, we'd call that a passive candidate. So if you have access to these passive candidates, it's good to be able to know what are the opportunities currently available within the portfolio so that you can make a higher quality introduction. So I think that's why the job board tends to be a good kind of low hanging fruit first step. And then the second thing I would say is that it's really hard to identify the perfect candidate for an open role, even for a recruiter. Like even if you're a full-time executive recruiter, it's hard. Never mind if it's like 20% of your job. So I don't think that platform folks or even heads of talent should have the expectation that they're going to be filling the funnel of candidates for a founder and like get a hire done. But you can add a lot of value even just by introducing someone to someone in the ICP. So just like sales, there's like the ideal candidate persona. And the founder can meet that person and say, hey, what's it like to be you? What are you motivated by? What would get you to like maybe you're not trying to leave your job right now, but what would get you to change? And then that person becomes an advocate of the search. Maybe they share it with other friends like them who they know who can then apply. So even a couple introductions in that regard can add a ton of value. And I think that's a low hanging fruit that folks can start with.
Yeah. Um, this is a tough question for you, Tony, or I think it's tough. Let's say you got six companies. They're
Mhm.
all looking for um, introductions to AI engineers. You only know one that's really good right now that's available. Like, how do you decide who gets the introduction, or how do you manage that maybe potential conflict, or the weight of the demand versus the supply?
I'd probably do like the opt-in route, right? Like I'd go to the AI engineer and be like, here are the 6 companies in our Portco that are hiring for your exact role. Who do you want an intro to? And then from there, make the intros.
Yes. All right. Good. I love that. That was something someone wrote in, and I think it's a good one. Great. Um, Kind of getting into our theme of job boards and talent networks, and some of the expertise Evan and Toni, you guys have doing this now for 15 years plus combined. Kicking things off for Evan, like every firm I think has a job board, a talent network now. But the gap between having one and hiring from is why we were just talking about. What separates like high performing talent network from one that's like I kind of set it and I forget it on my website, right? Like I kind of check the box, but yeah, I got a job board and I leave it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really how the team ends up using it. So there are pretty tactical ways to increase general traffic to the board. Like you can have events, you can post it on social media. There's kind of a natural SEO happening where people are finding it. You can put the link in your email footer, in your signature. Um, but I think beyond that, because of the specific nature of what it takes to find a great candidate for a role, you're not necessarily going for huge volume. Like these aren't like, waiter jobs, right? Like these are like typically very highly specialized knowledge worker roles. And so even one or two really high quality introductions, you have the potential to like that candidate could become a finalist immediately. And if that happens, that saves so much time if they end up getting hired. So educating your team, your partners on like, hey, we have this available. When you're meeting people in the world and you think they might be open to opportunities, have them check it out. If they request introductions, I can support on that, right? From the head of talent or the head of platform perspective, and just getting involved and making sure that people know this is a resource we have at the fund. We're aware of these opportunities and we're trying to make these high quality introductions. I think that's really what separates it, because you could make 20 high quality introductions that turn into 5 to 10 hires, and if the founder was going to spend 30 to $60,000 per hire hiring a recruiter to help with that, it's huge value that you're adding even with a small number of intros.
Yeah. Toni, you're a Getro customer. Like any tips or things you would recommend based on kind of what Evan just said of how you guys are leveraging Getro?
I would say Getro does make it a little easier for people, which is really nice. Like when Portcos tell us that they're hiring, in addition to us trying to make introductions, it's really nice. Getro has this feature that like you can insert or link where the Portco has posted their jobs, and Getro will like I think is it every 24 hours, Evan? It'll like read that
Yeah.
page and update like if the job is still there, if new jobs are posted, etc. And then to Evan's point earlier, right? Like there's brand alignment. So like anyone who's talking to someone at Preface knows that we invest in early stage enterprise companies. Um, Anyone who's talking to us usually has an interest of some sort in that space. And so like anytime they go to like our job board, they know that all of our companies fall within that range. And so there's already this like filter there. So anyone who
Yeah.
does click into any of the jobs like has already been, I would say, maybe 1 to 2 layers of filtering because one, they know what kind of companies we invest in. And then two, like, oh, okay, let me like double click into like I'm interested in data infrastructure. Okay, great. Here are the 3 companies in Preface that do it. And so Getro is just kind of nice on our end because it's like they do a lot of the heavy lifting for us. We just put the links in and then we can connect possible, candidates and founders through that source. So
Love
Yeah,
it.
and maybe one thing to add there too is that it's like if you've ever, I think most of the folks who um, I don't know, maybe at the partner level, but a lot of folks in our space have never really like looked for a job or been in multiple cycles of looking for jobs with startups. It's really hard to find these jobs. They're not typically posted on LinkedIn or Indeed or job boards, it's like if you're trying to find a job in early stage tech, even like pre-IPO, it's hard to know where these jobs even exist. And so even just having a curated list of these jobs is interesting for people who are open to that. And then they can also set up job alerts and get alerted when a job that fits their preference hits the board. And so for folks who are more passive, they have their head down, they're working, right? But if there's an opportunity at an early stage company that aligns with their values, and it's more likely that that's true because they know, the certain fund and the investment thesis, and they know that's aligned with their interests or their values, that I think that's really where these connections end up getting made.
Love it. Kind of going flipping now to fundraising. So we talked about talent and sourcing talent in jobs and job boards, to fundraising. We had Leo on recently on one of our live streams talking about how they're supporting portfolio companies, and it's like, hey, we could often suggest like the ones you probably already know or ones you want to talk to, but also some ones that you probably haven't heard of. And I think that's really interesting takeaway is like the kind of diamonds in the rough. And Evan, for you, what does a well-run fundraising intro process look like? Maybe
Mm.
to kick things off here.
Yeah. I mean, I think again, like just like in sales, you have like the ideal investor persona that you're looking for based on your industry, the size of your company, the type of round you want to raise. So getting clear on that and those parameters is the first step. Ideally trying to build that list using tools like Visible to do that. Should be flipping this question on you, Mike, actually. But yeah, like having a clear list that you can send to investors. And I think for me, the most value I've personally gotten from our investors in the fundraising process is being able to find warm relationships to uh, partners who are willing to take a call early on in the fundraising process and give you feedback, and even just give you like a quick take on, hey, look, this is the deal I'm presenting into the market. We're really early in the process. What do you think? Like, where are the holes in this? Is this interesting? Is this something that you think you would potentially invest in? But as a friendly conversation, and even earlier, early stage before you go launch a formal process, if you can get those introductions through investors, right, that can be huge. So I think as an investor, trying to maintain those relationships so that you can make those introductions, and sometimes that ends up leading to someone who actually invests, and sometimes not. But getting that information is super helpful.
Yeah, I just to go a level deeper there too. I think like for founders that could be listening to this, really it's first and foremost it is a process, and I think like that, especially like first time founders, and if you're early on in the fundraising cycle, just understand it's like, yeah, I'm kind of fundraising. I'm kind of not, like you're like either fundraising or you're not when you're running like the
Mhm.
process itself. And I get some good points there. I've been around like, yeah, making sure you're identifying the right investors. Do they invest in your space? Great. Have they invested in a competitor? No. Okay, good. And just making sure like you have the right tight ICP of like your ideal investor. Probably need 100 of them too, right? In that pipeline to start, and then that's going to whittle down to 50 or so, and then people taking the intro and the call, et cetera, et cetera. So I definitely think like process is the key takeaway, and like the work you put into the before you even
Mhm.
start fundraising, right? Like setting up your however you're going to track your intros and your pipeline and the the process that you want to run. I think it takes like a month to put that together. We like who do we have on recently? Brett, um, who mentioned like 131, like a month to put it all together in the prep, and then 3 months of the raise, and then a month to close it. Um, Toni, flipping it over to you, how should you like how should firms think about balancing helpful intros um to founders, but maybe like not overwhelming investors or founders with like irrelevant connections, right? I think like we've all been on the receiving end of an intro where it's like you get connected and you're like, what is this? It wasn't double opt-in or what have you. Like outside of like double opt-in, how should firms think about being helpful with their intros and not bombarding companies?
I mean, I think foundationally, before you even make an ask to any co-investor who you're considering, sending a founder to, like you should know where that Portco is, right? Like in their fundraising process, in their metrics, in what the ask is Series A, is an extension, is it X, Y, and Z, like at the very basic level. um, one of the things that we do is like we ask our founders ahead of time, like if you're even thinking about fundraising, whether it's in the next quarter or in the next year, like put it on our radar, like let us know so that we can work in lockstep with you to make curated introductions when that time comes, right? And so our time is valuable, founders' times are valuable, and like you don't want to like send out 10 uninformed introductions. It just makes everyone look bad. And so at the very basic level, it's like knowing where your founders are and like having ideally some sight into that ahead of time so that you can prepare. It just makes it all the more valuable. And those, like what Evan was saying, those warm intros are even more well received than just like a out of nowhere, which we would never do because it always double opt in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Great. One slide left before we wrap up today. Kind of moving from talk about talent, talk about fundraising, now talk about LPs and LP relationships, and just like internal operations that can improve relationships with LPs and firm reputation. Toni, like what are LPs starting to expect or expect from you or firms when it comes to like operational maturity and reporting? Has that changed at all, or has it been kind of the standard since you've been at Preface for the last 5 years?
say it's changed in regards to us just wanting to like hit it out of the park every single time with our LPs. You know, from an LP's perspective, the end of the day, they want their answers, they want their questions answered, especially like the ad hoc ones that come outside of like the quarterly reports. And then, for example, if you can do that in a reasonable time frame within 1 to 2 days, it makes LPs very, very happy. On the reporting end, LPs want like concise and I would say overly transparent reporting that show like learnings and growth opportunities both for fund and companies. And they basically just want to like be able to look at your LP report and understand like the key items in 30 seconds. And a big one is they want to trust the math, right? Like they want to be able to see like quarter over quarter, this tracks or like, hey, something's off. You don't want that. Like you want to be able to like, here it is, everything you need. And your LPs are like thumbs up, right? And Visible makes that very, very easy, like very, very easy on our end to make it beautiful and easily accessible. There's a lot of work that goes on the back end, but yeah, I will also add that for us, what makes our LP reporting kind of stand out also is we really lean on our like fund admin, our accounting, and like our tax service providers, and they become like extensions of our team. Like we treat them as part of our team. And so in aggregate together, when we synthesize or like our quarterly reports for our LPs, it's just like one nice package that everyone just feels very proud to ship out every quarter.
Yeah, great. And thanks for the plug. I was not expecting that, but I'll certainly take it. Evan, have you seen any firms use like platform strategy as a recruiting tool? Not for founders and recruiting them, but LPs. Like, have you anecdotally seen that with the customers you serve?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, like usually if a fund is in a fundraising cycle, it's like all hands on deck in a lot of ways. So I think with Getro, for example, a lot of firms will use a CRM like maybe Affinity to manage the deal pipeline and to kind of like track LP relationships. But Affinity doesn't have the LinkedIn first degree connections of the firm, which Getro does. So a lot of times folks will kind of go in and use Getro to understand who do we know in our network that could be a good fit as an LP, or like our partnership team is traveling to Chicago, right? Like who do we know in Chicago that could be a good fit to take a meeting? So just trying to expand the visibility on the warm network is definitely one way that folks will use it for LP recruiting.
Great. We're about time actually, so I'm gonna try to land the plane here. If you have any last questions, please write in. I think we got to a few of the live ones already. Toni or Evan, anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up here?
Thanks for having me. And like I mentioned earlier, if you two figure out, you know, the golden ticket platform, like sign me up ASAP.
The Holy Grail
Yes.
of I think of trying to prove out impact. No doubt. Well, thank you both so much for being great partners and spending your time with us today. Thanks for everyone who jumped on in with your questions. We will send this recap out here in the next week or so, if not sooner. But thanks everyone for joining. Looking forward to doing more of these, and we'll talk to everyone soon.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thank
See you guys.
you.
Bye bye.